Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones, coming to you here for what might be the final time in 2024. I'm pre-recording this episode. I am going to be on the road for the week of Christmas, as you're probably listening to this. I'm going to be on the road and visiting family and won't be in position to record a podcast. So I wanted to put together a little bit of a year in review for Purdue sports because in a lot of ways, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. A year of pure jubilation for the basketball program, a year of historic accomplishments. While on the football side, it was a historic year for all of the wrong reasons. So I'm going to look back here on the year that was, kind of talk a little bit about what I will remember most from this year. We're going to start with a couple of thoughts on the latest from the football side of things. So let's hop in. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Lots to talk about there. Come join the conversation. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. 2025 is going to be another big year, as we'll kind of talk about at the end. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. Lots of coaching hires since we've talked last. Barry Odom really starting to get that staff filled out. As I'm recording this, it was just announced that Mike Shearer will be the defensive coordinator coming along from UNLV. A real young guy, 31 years old, but has been with Barry Odom really since he got his starting coaching. Was a GA at Mizzou with him, then followed him to Arkansas, and then followed him to UNLV. So, lots of familiarity there. And that is really where this staff is going. You look at the offensive coordinator hire that I think we'd all probably agree was the most important hire Barry Odom had to make at Purdue. Probably the general manager spot up there as well. But Josh Henson is going to be the offensive coordinator. This is someone who was with Barry Odom at Mizzou for 6 or 7 years, I believe, as Odom climbed through the ranks at Missouri. Really a vertical escalation there. Someone Odom's very familiar with. And that, again, I think is really important here because Barry Odom is not going to be someone who is a real helicopter coach by all accounts. He kind of lets his assistants do their thing. This is someone that Barry Odom undoubtedly has comfort with. And what's interesting here, Josh Henson's background is an offensive line coach. Now, he's going to coach the tight ends at Purdue, but, the offensive line is an area that Purdue has really struggled at in recent years. And, this is not a program where you are going to stack blue-chip offensive linemen. You're not going to have oodles of 4- and 5-star recruits lined up to play on your offensive line. It's just not realistic. That's not something that programs outside of the elite programs tend to get. But you have to make the most of the guys you can get. You have to develop well. And I think that's something that, you can be excited about. He has spent time in pass-heavy schemes. And again, this is kind of Barry Odom following up on what he said when he indicated that, hey, I'm a coach with a defensive background, but make no mistake, we have to score points. We have to have an exciting offense. Henson spent the last 3 years at Southern Cal with Lincoln Riley. And while things haven't gone particularly well for Lincoln Riley out there, he's still one of the brightest offensive minds around. Still a guy who has put together really big offenses. You look at, his first 2 years with Caleb Williams and everything he did at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley is a great offensive coach. And if Josh Henson was able to pick up some stuff there, that's exciting. That's something that Purdue needs. No, he didn't call the plays there. And what I'm not sure about here is play calling experience, because he wouldn't have called the plays there. And he wouldn't have called the plays at Texas A&M when he was there under Jimbo Fisher for 4 years. Jimbo Fisher called the plays as well. And while Jimbo Fisher has been, a little controversial since he was at A&M, at one point, this guy was one of the bright offensive minds in the country. This guy had a really good offense when he was at Florida State, developed some NFL quarterbacks, won a national title with Jameis Winston. Christian Ponder, E.J. Manuel, had some really good quarterbacks there. And at Texas A&M, Kellen Mond did a nice job as well when Josh Henson was there. So this is someone who has been around high-level offensive coaches. This is Purdue really following through on the idea that even with a defensive head coach, it's not going to just be a defensive program. I don't know that that's super viable at Purdue. And by all accounts here, that's not the way Purdue wants to play. I don't have a ton of thoughts on some of these other assistants. A lot of these guys that have worked with Barry Odom before. The quarterback coach came from UCF, where he would have worked with Gus Malzahn. Seen some different stuff there. Some running quarterback stuff, a very different style of offense. Kind of Barry Odom, going in on the fact that he doesn't have a specific offensive scheme he wants to run. He's adaptable because what he did at UCLA with Brennan Marion and that run-heavy go-go offense is a lot different than what he did at Missouri when he had Drew Lock and they were throwing the ball a ton. Purdue has some guys on the staff now with different backgrounds. One thing I did notice is Jason Simmons staying on staff in an off-field role, I think like director of high school relations. That's a good thing. Jason Simmons, a good guy, someone who has been around Indiana high school football forever. That's important. Indiana is not going to fill up your roster and make you a really high-level program, but you can get some really good players out of Indiana, and you can get guys who have a vested reason to want to be at Purdue. And in the portal era, that certainly helps. And while I know a couple of key players from last year's team have left that have been from Indiana, I don't know that that's guaranteed to be the case always. There's a lot to like there. So, again, I wish I had more thoughts. This is all kind of coming quickly. As I record this here, it's Thursday afternoon. So the transfer portal is getting going. Purdue has some visitors coming this weekend. By the time you're listening to this, Purdue will have some commitments. I'm sure UNLV is going to have some guys come along. I know Purdue is having some guys in for visits that aren't UNLV guys. We'll ultimately see. But I do think that Purdue is going to hit the ground running here. And I know there was some hand-wringing of wanting Barry Odom to get involved in the transfer portal quicker. Look, I agree. I mean, you want to get in this as fast as possible, but filling out that staff has to be your number one priority. And that looks like it's wrapping up here on December 19th. You can hurry and get in the transfer portal all you want, but if you don't have the right staff around you, it's going to be a problem. We just saw that with the last coaching regime. Ryan Walters wasn't perfect, but neither was the rest of his staff, and that was as much of a part of the problem as Ryan Walters himself. Barry Odom's got his staff together. Now it's time to attack the portal. On the last episode, we talked about some of those areas that Purdue really needs to focus on: quarterback, O-line, linebacker, special teams. Every position group is a point of emphasis, though. There is no spot on this roster that can't be drastically improved. I would expect Purdue to be very, very active. I've had 5 or 6 high school guys come from UNLV as well. I don't know that those project to be instant impact guys, but Barry Odom's starting to get this roster taken control of. And, here on December 19th, it's going to be really interesting. I think classes start on the 13th to see what things look like there as guys start enrolling for the spring semester. I wanted to take a look back on the year that was today, though. Something I enjoy doing as I get older, and I've been, kind of religiously watching Purdue sports here for, the better part of a decade and a half now. It's fun what you remember from years, and when you look back on a year, what your memories are. Perhaps no season in Purdue history has had a bigger gap between the basketball memories and the football memories than this one. When 2024 began, it began with as much pressure as we've ever seen on a Purdue team, and that was that Purdue's basketball team had to get to the Final Four. I don't believe in like the now or never line of thinking. I don't believe in the Final Four or bust mentality, because no matter what happened, this season was going to happen. Purdue wasn't going to just fold the program, but there was a ton of pressure on Purdue to make it happen finally. Everything was aligning Purdue's way. You had the best player in the country. You had some elite role players. You had some really good players on that roster to help complement Zach Edey, to help complement Braden Smith. A lot of really good things going on. And it was a year where Purdue looked like it belonged in the cream of the crop nationally. Purdue had done what it did in the non-conference and beat a ton of really good teams. It looked like it had to happen. Really, it did. And I think most of the outside public thought Purdue would get there. Like when you saw the people filling out their brackets and stuff, a lot of folks had Purdue doing it. Something I'll always remember was just the mass panic after each of Purdue's losses, especially those 3 regular season ones. I remember when Purdue lost at Ohio State in February after Jake Diebler took over, interim coach situation. And Purdue hadn't played super well in a game or two prior to that. And the panic was just high. Folks were worried. Folks were paranoid. Folks were very concerned that this year wasn't going to be everything they hoped for. But something that, as I look back on last season, up until UConn, Purdue won every big game it played. Purdue won, and I guess it wasn't 2024, but it all funnels in. Purdue won all of those big non-conference games. Maui, Arizona, Alabama. It won all these games. Xavier wasn't that big, but then you get into Big Ten play, and Purdue sweeps in Illinois. And that win at Illinois was maybe as sweet of a regular season win as you can get. Purdue coming back after starting that game really poorly, and Braden Smith putting the State Farm Center to sleep. Purdue swept Indiana the year after getting swept by the Hoosiers. A real role reversal there. Purdue pounded them, and Zach Edey hit the 3 at Mackey Arena. Purdue won that top 10 matchup at Wisconsin that you almost forget about, but a big Sunday CBS game with Wisconsin in the top 10. Purdue goes up there and gets a win. It took down Michigan State at home to clinch the conference title. It beat Wisconsin on senior day. The Big Ten tournament was what it was, and that, it was the first time where I can just remember no one caring about the Big Ten tournament. There was no push from Purdue's fan base to want to go win it. It had finally gotten to the point where it was tournament time. Braden Smith had a little tweaked ankle scare, and everyone just wanted to shut it down. And Purdue had already won the regular season title. It had gotten its 26th Big Ten title. It was time for the NCAA tournament, and it was time for Purdue to reach the Final Four for the first time since 1980. As I look back on the tournament run, Purdue did what it did against a Grambling State team that, Purdue was clearly going to win that game. Purdue was clearly miles better, but that second round game against a solid mid-major in Utah State, Purdue just steamrolled them. Utah State hung around for a little bit and made it interesting early on for about 10 minutes, and then Purdue just put the pedal to the metal and blew them out. Purdue won that game by 40 in the second round. And, I remember before that game, some student reporter had basically told Matt Painter they were probably going to win. And Matt Painter gave a classic Matt Painter response. But, it was at that point that it kind of reminded you how good Purdue was. And it made it just feel like you were almost crazy for being worried. And the same deal ensued against Gonzaga in the Sweet 16 when Gonzaga gave Purdue a run for its money for a little bit. But in that second half, there was never really a time where you thought Purdue was going to lose. And Purdue went in to the Elite Eight having to feel really good about itself. And it set up a game that turned into just an all-time classic. I went back and watched it the other day, that Purdue-Tennessee game from the Elite Eight, and just a classic college basketball game. A game that, you don't see it a ton in college basketball anymore, where you just have these superstars. But that's what that game had. That game had Zach Edey. That game had Dalton Knecht, the two best players in the country going at it. Both had phenomenal games. Zach Edey had 40, his career high at Purdue. Lance Jones hits the giant shot at the end of that game. But, that moment wasn't too big for Purdue because Purdue got down, I want to say 9 in the first half fairly quickly. But Purdue fought back and took the lead at halftime. And in that second half, it was back and forth. I can't remember if Purdue ever trailed in the second half much, but down the stretch, Purdue just made plays. And whether it was Zach Edey, whether it was Purdue getting stops defensively, Dalton Knecht cooled down a little bit. Zach Edey has the block. And it was just Purdue doing what it needed to do to win that game. It was a gut check of sorts on a giant stage to where it's not fair to call it a gut check. That's just a high-level Elite Eight game. But Purdue finally did it. And it was such a special moment. I was in Detroit for that game, and to see what it meant to so many Purdue fans, to see the tears in the stands, to see, Zach Edey running up and hugging Matt Painter, and just the reaction. It was something that meant a ton to a lot of people. And in this era where you see fans frustrated by the state of things, of NIL, of the transfer portal, it was a reminder of what makes college sports special. Because while pro sports has passion and has great fan bases and all of that, it doesn't have what you saw at Little Caesars Arena on that day. And that was Purdue Nation just in euphoria over what it had waited so long to have happen. And Purdue went to the Final Four, and the celebration just continued. It was kind of a weird situation because it had been so long since Purdue made the Final Four that to some degree it felt like Purdue was over the hump. But Purdue still had a very real chance at winning a national title. Purdue was the second. You line up the four, Purdue is the second most likely to win it on the betting odds and all of that. Purdue got by NC State comfortably despite not playing well. That game will be my reminder forever as to how much of a fluke the NCAA tournament can be. It is a wonderful sporting event. There is nothing like it. It is so much fun to watch as a spectator. It is not the best way to crown a champion. The best and most deserving teams often don't win it. But in that game, Purdue turned it over almost 20 times. Braden Smith almost turned it over 10 times. Yet the game was never in doubt. Purdue cruised past NC State. Just the Cinderella run finally came to a screeching halt. And while the championship game went how it went, UConn was uniquely equipped to shut down Purdue on the perimeter. Zach Edey did what he did. No one else did anything. And ultimately, UConn did what Tom Izzo had spent 4 years trying to do and doing so unsuccessfully. Dan Hurley let Zach Edey beat him. Well, Zach Edey tried to beat him, made sure no one else was going to beat him, and it worked. That doesn't take away anything from the season that was. A truly, truly special season. A phenomenal send-off for a special character. Zach Edey being a larger-than-life figure at Purdue, both literally and figuratively. One of the best stories you'll ever find in college basketball. Going from an anonymous no-name recruit that Purdue took after Hunter Dickinson and Ryan Kalkbrenner committed elsewhere to one of the best college basketball players ever. And certainly one of the best, if not the best, in the 21st century. Just remarkable. It was a season so long in the making that it was a really, really special moment. While basketball ended and everything Purdue fans could have hoped Football was in a little bit different of a spot because I don't, year 2 under Ryan Walters, I think fans went into the year still pretty bought in as to what Ryan Walters was trying to build, as to what Ryan Walters was trying to do. And after a blowout win over Indiana State, I think a lot of folks, myself included, I thought Purdue looked like a better team in that game. Maybe a little prisoner of the moment. It showed this football season the difference that a month can make and how long a month is in the college football season, how long a college football season can be, despite just being 14 weeks. Purdue fans went to bed on Friday, September 13th, as a touchdown underdog at home against Notre Dame, kind of dreaming of what could be. Could this be a signature moment? Could this be one of those Ross-Ade magic games where Purdue springs an upset? After all, Notre Dame had lost to Northern Illinois the week before and looked vulnerable. By October 13th, Purdue was getting ready to play Illinois. Ryan Walters had taken over offensive play calling. Ryan Brown was playing with Hudson Card injured. And the fan base was, for the most part, completely out on Ryan Walters. And while there were certainly some stragglers who wanted to believe and did believe, the tenor was clear. Purdue fans were pissed. Purdue fans were not happy. And as that season went on, it felt like it took forever. It felt like it was never going to end as Purdue lost in non-competitive fashion week after week, or in the few games that were competitive, just in maddening fashion. The season's upside was projected on the portal guys really hitting, and they didn't. There's no other way to put it. Purdue took, 15, 20 guys in the portal ahead of the 24 season, and you had a few hit. The punter was good. The long snapper was good. Tells you all you need to know about the season when the punter and long snapper are the two best guys out of the portal. But Reggie Love did some all right things. It never clicked. It never clicked at all for this roster. And it certainly had more talent than it showed on the field, but it wasn't a great roster. And Purdue's portal evaluations didn't work as hoped. And by the end of the year, Purdue's fans had turned so frustrated by it. Purdue didn't have a choice. Purdue really didn't. Purdue's fans had been so good to it over the course of the season, with wonderful crowds at Ross-Ade Stadium, with tremendous support coming into the season, that when everything started to go south, I don't think Purdue could afford to lose all of that. The fans gave Purdue no choice. It was abundantly clear on Twitter, on message boards, on Facebook, I'm sure in the JPC's email box and post office box. It just didn't work. And Purdue had no choice but to cut ties and move on. I know there was the month-long drama of will Purdue bring this back with new assistants and all of that, but after Purdue lost to Northwestern, it looked bad. It didn't look likely. After Purdue lost to Michigan State, you knew Purdue was going to go 1-11, and then it lost 66-0 to Indiana. And ultimately, the game that I think defined the season the most, you pick that, you pick Notre Dame, you pick being wholly non-competitive against Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Wisconsin. It just came to a point where Purdue couldn't do it anymore. And we talked lots in kind of the post-mortem episode as to why it didn't work. But ultimately, Purdue took a giant swing on Ryan Walters, and it ended up being a Javier Baez swing. It was a really big swing. If it connected, it could have worked well. It just didn't. And Purdue kind of moves on from that. No worse off than it was before. I mean, to some degree, yes, but it's not like Ryan Walters inherited a great roster. It needed work. And now Barry Odom comes in, a complete 180 of a hire from Ryan Walters, a guy who has experience, who has built staffs, and is coming to revitalize the program a little bit. And we'll see what goes on. But I think there is a little more life in this program than there was a month ago. And that's what Purdue desperately needed to happen. On the basketball court again, Purdue had to move on from the Zach Edey era, and we're still watching this play out, and who knows, come this time next year, what we'll be saying about how the winter and spring went for Purdue basketball. But Purdue continues to schedule aggressively in the non-conference and challenge itself, and Purdue got beat. It didn't work to perfection for Purdue the way it often had in recent years, but Purdue basketball is still in a spot here where it has a lot to play for in the new year. I'm recording this ahead of that Auburn game. I don't know if Johnny Broome will play. I know Purdue is a large underdog. Auburn at this point is the best, at this point in the season is the highest rated team in KenPom history. Going to be a difficult one, whether Broome plays or not. But Purdue's kind of gearing up here for a three-peat in the Big Ten if it can do that. Purdue's gearing up for another decent run in the NCAA tournament, and it's going to be fascinating to see how things play out. As we move into 2025, obviously, how does basketball finish up? Where does basketball look ahead of next year? Next year being a year where everything is on the table for Purdue. The Final Four is in Indianapolis. It'll be a senior-laden team with Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn. That's not to throw this year away because Purdue can still do a lot. But next year is going to be that next year where you look at and say, boy, this is really Purdue's shot. On the football side, Barry Odom is going to have to try to continue building momentum. He has a couple winnable games to start, but it's another tricky schedule. It's not going to be easy. I don't want to get too philosophical here, but it's not like a record is going to be exactly what tells you everything you need to know about Purdue next year. Purdue still has a difficult schedule. Purdue's going to have its lumps, no doubt. No matter how well Purdue recruits out of the portal, it's going to be difficult to achieve great immediate success. But progress is going to be a gray area. It's going to be like Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart said about obscenity. I know it when I see it. And Purdue is going to have to show progress. But if it doesn't show in the record, you're going to know it when you see it. You're going to know it if you see a football team that looks competent. If you see a football team that is doing the little things well. That's really important. That's what Purdue needs badly. And if Purdue can do that, if Purdue can show notable progress that everyone can know it when they see it, that's pretty big. That's a really nice start for Purdue if it can happen. This is the year of revenue sharing, where the college sports model continues to get turned over on its side. It's going to be another year where we learn more about the future of it. We know what the compensation looks like to start. With the revenue sharing agreement, with NIL still continuing, we don't know what those NIL restrictions will look like. I am very skeptical about them. I'll believe them when I see them. But you will have revenue sharing where these athletes can get a cut. I would love, I don't know if schools will do it or not, but I would love to see what the revenue sharing numbers look like. What does each sport get to spend? What do certain players get to spend? It's not going to be, it's not going to be like something where you get a whole salary sheet like it's the MLB, but some of that's going to be interesting to see what you can glean. Because NIL is going to be a part of it too, and guys will make some money there. That's not going to go away, but the future is fascinating. As I'm recording here today, we're a day away from the Diego Pavia court ruling, where the NCAA didn't exactly get treated particularly well. You had a judge basically say, your academic argument here is nonsensical, given what you allow from a transfer perspective. These guys to transfer all around. It's not about sports, or it's not about school. It's about sports. That's something to monitor as well moving forward. There are so many moving parts in the college space landscape right now that Purdue's just got to continue to keep its head above water and figure out where it lands. It's going to be a big year for the sport. It's going to be a big year for Purdue. I'm very excited to talk about it with you guys here on the show. If you don't, be sure to follow on Twitter @BoilersBeyond, because there is going to be a lot to talk about next year. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss a thing. Merry Christmas to all of you. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas time with your family, with your friends, however you choose to celebrate. I hope you have a wonderful time. Enjoy some quality time off work, around loved ones. We'll be back the week of New Year's, before or after the 1st. I'm not positive, but we'll kind of look at where Purdue basketball is going into Big Ten season. We'll recap all the latest from Purdue's transfer portal, where Purdue's at there heading into the new year under Barry Odom. Until then, guys, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, take care.